Assalamualaikum. So today we're from group 3. We'll be presenting on the comparison.
Singapore, which is enriched with new ideas for its development and the cultural diversity, all these elements make up a large portion for what Singapore is famous for. On the other hand, Brunei is also known to be an advantage for its ability as the main export consists of three major commodities of crude oil, petroleum products, and liquefied natural gas, which are also largely all over the world. So to go further into the depth of the topic, it is proper to discuss the basis of the topic, that is the political system. So generally, political system is a type of political organization that can be recognized, observed, or otherwise declared by a state, while David Easton also defined it as a system that can be designated as the interactions through which values are authoritatively allocated for a society. In general, discussing the political system in both countries, Singapore practices a Westminster-style parliamentary system, which are operating as a parliamentary republic where elections there are held periodically. Meanwhile, in contrast to Singapore, the Sultan of Brunei is the head of state and administration of the island nation, and politics there are conducted within the framework of an absolute monarchy. In addition, Brunei is the only governing monarchy in Southeast Asia and the only absolute monarchy that remains in existence in Asia. So these both countries are renowned for their emphasis on economic, economic development and effective management. So even with a number of similarities between these both countries, there are major differences that can be found in their political system. So this can be seen in its governmental, party, and electoral system, which will later be further discussed in this presentation.
So moving on, firstly, my name is Intan Nadhirah, metric number 2127738. So right now, I will be explaining on the comparison of the governmental system between Singapore and Brunei. So firstly, what is a government system? So it is comprised institutions and regulations controlling the executive, judicial, and legislative branches of the state. So the governmental system is an organization or system consisting of individuals like president and others that govern a nation or the state. So each government has their own constitution to maintain the efficiency and create a framework for stability. So basically, the constitution is responsible for establishing social norms, defense, internal relations, and public service. So each branch, which is executive, judicial, and legislative, have their own duties, authorities, obligations, and responsibilities. So basically, all these three branches is different and has their own duty. So the executive is the fundamental center of the government, enforced by one party or powerful agent. So right now, I'll be explaining the difference on each of the branches, like executive, judicial, and legislative between Singapore and Brunei. So firstly, for executive, so in Singapore, the Singapore's Parliamentary Republic, which is governed by the People Action Party, which is PAP. So basically, they have a strong political power in Singapore since 1959. Like despite the free and fair elections, and also the opposition parties also actively participate. So it could be seen there are popular participation. However, the PAP still is the strong political power there. Like the government also restrict the citizens' right, including privacy, freedom of press, freedom of speech, and freedom of religion. So the president was chosen every 6 years and has discretionary and custodial powers and must exercise the authority in line with the cabinet's advice. So the president has the responsibility for maintaining the government integrity. So next is in the Brunei, which is a whole lot different. Where in Brunei, the Brunei Sultanate, which is Sultan Haji Hassan al Bolkiah, is the one that controlling Brunei for over 600 years. So the Sultan there also heads security forces and holds finance ministerial position. Moreover, the freedom of assembly, religious practice, freedom of speech, and freedom of press are also like severely restricted in Brunei. So it could be seen that the Brunei's government structure differ from other states due to could be seen that there are lack of popular participation in elections since the Sultan is the one that controlling the country for over 600 years. So the 1959 constitution in Brunei grants the Sultan dual role, which is the head of state and also the prime minister. Next is the legislative. So the difference between the Singapore and Brunei, where in Singapore the legislative system involves the parliament, the one that making the legislation through examining and discussing draft laws. So the process of how a bill becomes a law, there are process where include the first reading, second reading, and then committee stage and presidential council for minority rights review. So the law is introduced in the government gazette and becomes an act of parliament after the presidential approve the bill. So the primary duty of the Singapore Parliament is passing laws regulating the state. While in Brunei, the Brunei's legislative system is based on the Sultan and also Yang di-Pertuan's authority, with the Legislative Council passing bills with their approval. So they can make public interest order and can also enforce laws under the proclamations of emergency. So basically, the Sultan and Yang di-Pertuan can also make orders and prescribe penalties and also provide court trials. So the bills passed by the council become law only with their approval, which is the Sultan and Yang di-Pertuan. So even though the advisory bodies provide input towards them, but the Sultan has the final say in governance. So next, we will be explaining on the judiciary between the Singapore and Brunei. So firstly, in Singapore, in 1970, the jury system was eliminated in Singapore's judiciary system. So the state courts and the Supreme Court share judicial authority with the Court of Appeal is the highest court in Singapore. So the High Court judges and judicial commissioners have the same powers and immunity, with some judges designated for specific legal areas such as criminal law, civil, and others. So basically, the judiciary ensures everyone in Singapore receives justice. So while in Brunei, the Brunei judiciary system consists of Supreme Court, intermediate courts, subordinate courts, and also Sharia court. So the legal system is based on English common law with an independent judiciary. So basically, the local magistrate courts handle most cases with arrangement with the UK. So and Brunei also has an Islamic court system where they apply the Sharia law in Muslim matters. So overall, regarding the governmental system, between the Singapore and Brunei, so it could be seen that the governmental system in Singapore and Brunei have a distinct governmental system where the Singapore they operates under parliamentary republic with a Westminster democracy with regular elections and also there are multi-party system. While in Brunei, they operate as an absolute monarchy, as it could be seen earlier, where the Sultan is the one that controlling so the Sultan, it could be seen the Sultan holding the ultimate authority there. So moreover, the Singapore system emphasized the democratic principles, while the Brunei's system revolves around the Sultan's authority. So that's all from me. Thank you.
In Singapore, the party system is a dominant party system where the multiple party exists, but since its first ever general election, it has been dominated by PAP. So, since its first ever election and the latest election, the People Action Party has won every election and became the government until this day. So, Ronald McDonald defines a dominant party system is where a single party secure about 60% or more of the seats. For instance, in Singapore in the 2020 election, PAP has won 93 of 111 constituted seats. This is more than 60%, while the opposition party like the Progress Singapore Party, the Workers' Party, and the Singapore Republic Party has only won 24, 21, and 11 seats respectively. So, uh, The political academician observed that the PAP dominance is attributed to its effective governance and successful policy since its independence. For instance, like since PAP took office, they have managed to turn Singapore a from a port city into an advanced and first country city states. Opposition parties struggle to challenge PAP position due to its historical success in government, and until this day they have been excellent in in governing the countries. However, there are allegations against PAP where they were alleged to abuse the power to prevent a fair election. For instance, there are accusations involving the use of Internal Security Act to arrest political parties, and mainstream media in Singapore is closely aligned with the government and support its policies. An allegation of gerrymandering involves changes in constituency boundaries announced just before the election, disadvantaging opposition parties. In Brunei, there is no political parties. This is because Brunei is an absolute monarchy. Unlike a democratic countries, Brunei does not hold election. Therefore, there is no need for political parties to exist. So, in Brunei, the Sultan holds absolute executive power, where the Sultan appoints the Legislative Council and Supreme Courts. Executive power in Brunei is hereditary, typically passing to the first son of the Sultan and his first wife. So therefore, it can be said that there is no any necessity for Brunei to have parties because first off, they are monarchy, they do not hold any election. However, there is a special case where the National Development Party, Parti Pembangunan Negara, was the only party registered due to its allegiance to the monarch. However, the party later was deregistered because they cannot conform to the strict election, to the strict Brunei Brunei government Brunei governance rule, and it must be noted that since Brunei is a monarch country, an absolute monarch country, they do not hold any election. The party does not serve the usual purpose of role of a political party, more like a supporting medium for the current monarch because they work together and that's why it's allegiance to the monarch.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is TENGKU and I will be explaining on the subtopic of comparison of electoral system in Singapore and also Brunei. So there's three elements that I will be comparing. So first off is the representation and also inclusiveness. So firstly, in Singapore, the electoral system ensures a degree of inclusiveness through the mechanisms like GRCs and also NCMPs. These provisions aim to balance majority rule with minority representation and opposition presence in parliament, while in Brunei, it is in contrast actually, Brunei system is less inclusive with limited avenues for public participation and representation. The appointed legislative council lacks the direct democratic legitimacy found in elected bodies. The second one will be in comparison of political competition. First, in Singapore, although dominated by the PAP, Singapore's electoral system has been increasing competition from opposition parties. The presence of NCMPs and the gradual rise of opposition MPs indicate a new move towards greater political pluralism, while in Brunei, political competition is virtually non-existent because the sultans here control over appointments and the limited role of political parties restrict any meaningful opposition, ensuring the continuation of absolute monarchy system in Brunei. Moving on to comparing the governance and accountability in Singapore and Brunei. In Singapore, the mixed electoral system contributes to governance by combining the stability with accountability. Regular elections and parliamentary debates allow for some level of governmental scrutiny and responsiveness to public concerns, while in Brunei, it is characterized by the centralization of power. The lack of electoral accountability and political opposition means that the Sultan's decisions are rarely challenged and also potentially impacting transparency and also responsiveness. Thus, to sum up, the electoral system in Singapore and Brunei reflect their unique political context and governance structures. Singapore's system blends elements of majoritarian and proportional representation to ensure stable governance while accommodating to the minority voices and oppositions, while in Brunei, it rooted in absolute monarchy, with the decision of the Sultan provides limited electoral participation, focusing on appointed representation. Understanding these systems highlights the diversity of electoral process and their implications for democratic governance in Southeast Asia, as we mentioned in Singapore and also Brunei.
So to analyze in governmental sense in Singapore, the Prime Minister is the head of government and holds the most significant executive authority, while the Parliament considers policies, enacts legislation, and examines the activities of the administration. On the other hand, Brunei's political system is based on an absolute monarchy, in which we can see that the Sultan has the last say over all matters in the government. It is also known to be one of the world's longest reigning and few surviving absolute monarchs. So the difference also can be seen observed through their parliamentary system, in which Singapore is characterized by a limited opposition, where a powerful executive branch and a dominating ruling party. So the government is made up for a unicameral parliament and a parliamentary republic with a powerful executive branch headed like Malaysia by the Prime Minister. So despite the country's regular elections and parliamentary republican system, the People's Action Party, PAP's dominance and strict government control over the media and public assembly have led to the criticisms of limited political freedom. So concerns about political elitism and a lack of genuine political competition have arisen in Singapore. This can be seen as one of the challenges for Singapore in its political system. In contrast to Singapore's system, Brunei does not have at all multiple political parties and prohibits their formation. Instead, the Sultan, who is the leader and the head of the nation, consolidates authority within the royal family by appointing individuals to key government positions like the Council of Cabinet Ministers. So the body of high-ranking Brunei officials, which includes the senior leaders of Brunei's executive branch, led by the Sultan himself, ever since 1984. So lastly, for the electoral system for Singapore, it can be seen that they apply group representation constituencies and a first past post system, which as mentioned before, has drawn criticism for its effect on political variety, even though it is intended to provide stability and effective governance. Meanwhile, in Brunei, the Sultan and the royal family hold the majority of the country's power under the absolute monarchy system. Like Singapore, the criticism have arisen due to the fact that there are no competitive elections, but in Brunei, it is due to the fact that there is no political parties and the monarchy largely controls governance. So although Brunei has prospered economically under the system, concerns of representation and public engagement in governance are raised by the absence of political plurality and electoral procedures. So people cannot choose their leaders or participate in governance because there are no democratic procedures or even elections. As a result, political plurality and electoral competition are lacking in Brunei, and the monarchy holds a disproportionate amount of authority within the country's political structure. So, as a conclusion, with all that being said, to sum up, due to the disparity between these two countries in their political settings and historical trajectories, Singapore and Brunei have quite diverse political, party, and electoral systems. Singapore, a parliamentary republic with competitive elections, a multi-party political system and a separation of powers, differs from Brunei, which is an absolute monarchy with concentrated royal authority with no political parties and no electoral procedures. It is also clear that while Brunei and Singapore both have placed a high priority on economic growth and stability, their approaches to public involvement, separation of power, and governmental principles differ. So unlike Brunei, which has a system based on centralized power and royal authority, Singapore places a higher priority on efficiency and technical leadership within a democratic framework.